shall not eat of every tree of the garden. Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil.
The trail of the serpent is an apt sentence that describes the operation of the enemy of our souls, not only for mankind, but also particularly for the Lord's people. Right in the beginning we see our enemy, Satan, using the serpent in the Garden of Eden to speak his deceptive words to Eve. Many years later, we also see that when Moses made a brass serpent on a pole, and the children of Israel were healed by looking to it, we see that many decades later, it is then worshipped. So we see right through the timeline. So this is the trail of the serpent. And then, of course, we see that also there was a serpent stone, which Adoniah slew sacrifices at the serpent stone. And then we see, of course, as history begins to progress towards our present time, there were various gods and goddesses connected with this. But one particular god was worshipped, or the worship of the serpent god, Asclepius. And this was in Pergamon. And there was a temple to Asclepius in Pergamon. And so it brings us through the centuries, the trail of the serpent, till we actually see symbols which are used even there in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. The very throne, the very papal throne, has 4 pillars that are serpentine pillars. Now Asclepius was worshipped at Pergamon in the Asclepion. And there we see there is a huge stone which has serpents on it. And there the people sought and worshipped the Asclepian gods in hope of having healings and in hope of having dreams where they will be communicated by from the spirit world to receive remedies for their illnesses. In the book of Revelation we find that the Apostle John has it revealed to him that Pergamos is the seat of the throne of Satan. And in Pergamos there was a big temple to Zeus, and there was a huge altar to Zeus, and there was a throne of Zeus in the temple with a ginormous statue of the god Zeus. Then we see there is also the worship of the serpent god. So these two things are very interesting, how they coincide with how men, church leaders, so-called bishops, different ones throughout the centuries, began to mix in these things until the present day. It is horrifying to see how all these symbols and how all these things are mingled in to what is called the Latin faith or the Roman faith, which indeed today we know as being Roman Catholic religion or Latin religion. This is the trail of the serpent. And in this little introduction, I hope that you have something of an understanding to this, as seen on the pictures and the diagrams in this video. Now, it is a known fact that the very last legal king of Babylon, Attalus, bequeathed that Babylonian power onto the Caesars. And when he did this, he transferred the power of being the last legal king of Babylon, indeed, unto the Caesars. So Attalus was what is known as the Pontifex Maximus of the pagan religion. Indeed, in Pergamos, and indeed amongst the Etruscans and other branches of the Babylonian religion. And he bequeathed this on the Caesars, and they began to use the title of Pontifex Maximus, because they were now invested with the authority to be the Pontifex Maximus of the pagan religions of Rome. And indeed, not just religions, but the one main religion, which was to do with the serpent god. And this serpent was taken from, we find, the pagan peoples of the Etruscans, and later on it was transferred to Rome, where the earliest symbol was the red dragon, which we find in the book of Revelation. And this was a standard which the Romans carried when they were going into war, etc. Not just the other standards that we see, but this was a religious standard which was carried, and so on. It's also interesting to note that Saturn was one of the main gods also that was incorporated into the secret worship that became known as Vaticanus on the Vatican Hill. So all these things blend into one. But my point is, the whole history goes back to the Garden of Eden. And the whole thing goes back to when Moses made a brass serpent in the wilderness by the instruction of the Lord. But then later on in history, the people are worshipping this brass serpent. And there's even the serpent stone, Zoheleth. And so we see it became perverted. And of course, it became even more perverted when we realize that by the time it gets into Greek mythology and Asclepius, you see the statues of him with a staff or a rod which is entwined with a serpent. And so these things became idolatrous. And so today, that same spirit is moving in amongst people who are willing to receive this kind of thing. And I'm afraid idolatry is becoming rampant. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 4 tells us, and the previous verse, to make no graven images in the likeness of male or female, either the things above in heaven, stars, sun and moon, or of man or woman, or beast or creeping things on the earth. To make no images, no graven images, and certainly not to bow down to them. And now we see that many people are going over to the Roman Catholic religion. They may not be telling us fully that they're going over into that and they're converting to Roman Catholicism, but they are having meetings with the Pope and so on. And if you realize that that throne is nothing but Satan's throne, because when the Apostle John was on the Isle of Patmos, it was revealed to him that Satan's throne was at Pergamos, but that throne has been transferred and it's no longer at Pergamos. The true spiritual power of that throne is now Vaticanus. And may God open your eyes to the understanding of these things, that we remain clear, clean, holy people of the Lord, and not following the footsteps of the children of Israel, who did these things, and who began to imbibe the worship of other gods. May God truly keep all of our hearts in Jesus' name.